Oh, hello there. I didn't see you come in. I was just about to sit down by the fire with my good friend Dr. Shirt Huggins here and read some literature if you'd like to join us. Tonight we'll be looking at Biology for Beginners by Moon and Man, revised edition 1938, 1941. I don't know what it means when there's two copyright dates, but there's two of them. Specifically, we'll be looking at chapter 31 on reptiles, and even more particularly, the section on snakes. By looking at the information students were learning in their textbooks about snakes nearly a century ago, we'll examine how our understanding of snakes has developed over the decades and dispel some outdated ideas about our slithery friends. We will also be reading this script for a YouTube video that I found tucked neatly inside the book, because that's where I put the script for the YouTube video that I wrote, because I thought that would make it look more natural and nobody would know I'm using a script in this video. Given the length of this section and the density of the information it gives us an opportunity to talk about, I've decided to split this into multiple videos for the sake of time. So be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you're interested in this sort of content and want to know when the next part gets uploaded. Notifications will also help because I have yet to establish a regular upload schedule, and I'm honestly just putting these out whenever I have the time. I have a full-time job, a wife, a house, 2 cats, 2 snakes, and a dog. Oh, I forgot about the isopods in here, jeez. That all require portions of my time, and I'm still figuring out the process for YouTube, and I don't quite have a workflow nailed down yet. That said, though, I appreciate everyone who watches my videos, and I really enjoy making them, so you can expect these to keep rolling out even if the pace is slow. One last thing before we get to the book, I'm attending the Show Me Reptiles Expo in Springfield, Mass. on March 3rd. This will be my first time at a reptile expo, and I'll be going with my friend Marcus, who goes by Cookie Jedi on YouTube and Twitch. I'll include some links to his channels where he makes gaming content, and we'll hopefully be getting some footage of that reptile expo to put that into a video. So that may be the next video before I get to the next part of this book. Anyway, so that's everything I needed to go over before we get into the reading, so we'll get into the reading. Chapter 31 begins with a small blurb introducing us to reptiles. Read the blurb. There is probably no group of animals concerning which there is more widespread misinformation than the reptiles. Perhaps the truth about reptiles is so strange that it is hard to believe. For instance, snakes can swallow objects much larger than their own heads. The tongue of the snake is really a sort of ear. Some snakes can live for months, even years, without eating. The blue racer snake, though entirely without legs, can travel over the ground as fast as a boy can run. Galapagos Island tortoises are probably the oldest living animals. Most turtles lay eggs on land in holes dug for that purpose. Many countries depend upon lizards to control insect pests. This chapter discusses these and other interesting facts. It corrects false ideas about reptiles. I feel like that last sentence could have been part of the sentence before, but they didn't ask me to edit this. I think it's certainly still true that reptiles are definitely perhaps the most misunderstood class of vertebrates. It is definitely true that snakes can swallow objects larger than their own heads. The first issue we run into is where the book claims that snakes use their tongues as a type of ear. They do not. That's not the case. Next error was actually the most accurate information available until recently, where the book claims that Galapagos tortoises are the oldest living animals. It was discovered in 2016, so we'll give them a break on that, that Greenland sharks can live to be even older than Galapagos tortoises. So that's just a little bit of an update, not really anything we can super fault them on. The section that lists the types of reptiles and their characteristics has our next bit of outdated information. Birds aren't included in the list of animals that are counted as reptiles. They also leave out the non-avian dinosaurs, but I think I'll give them a pass and assume they only meant to list the extant lineages of reptiles. But Archaeopteryx had been discovered by that time that the book was published, so I can't really let that one slide. In the list of traits that distinguishes reptiles from amphibians, the only errors I see are a result of the fact that they were not considering birds to be reptiles when they wrote this book, such as stating that all reptile eggs are leathery and that all reptiles are covered in scales, rather than including the possibility of them being covered in feathers with scales on their feet and feathers everywhere else. But since feathers are just modified scales, maybe I shouldn't be too harsh on them there. And now we come to the bulk of our focus today, the section that focuses on the best type of animal to ever live, snakes. And you can tell it's not just me that loves these wiggly little buddies. Moose. Moose isn't particularly interested in snakes, but she is in the shot, so thank you, Moose. Goodbye, I love you. And you can tell it's not just me that loves these wiggly little buddies. The person responsible for writing the snake section of this book is clearly also quite smitten with them. All snakes are muscular, graceful, and usually swift of motion, while many are very beautiful. There is no living creature which displays such a beautiful pattern of colors and rainbow iridescence as the reticulated python of the East Indies, says William T. Hornaday. This introduction to snakes is completely accurate. Snakes are definitely very strong and very handsome and perfect in every way. But with that, we move on to the first snake subsection, false ideas about snakes, which ironically gives us some insight into misconceptions that even snake experts in the first half of the 1900s still held about these animals, as not every assertion in this section will be correct. We start out well enough establishing that snakes as a clade are harmless and useful, which I agree with, since the vast majority of snakes are non-venomous and couldn't do anything to hurt a person. The book does use the term class to refer to the entirety of snakes when Serpentes is technically a suborder, though. We then have a list of all the dangerous snakes in the US, which includes the rattlesnakes, copperhead, and moccasin or cottonmouth. But then, interestingly, we have coral snake as well as harlequin listed. I hadn't heard of harlequin snakes before, but on further research, it seems that they are a type of coral snake. The text also clarifies that snakes are not slimy and typically have very smooth and clean skin and are usually cool to the touch. All of that is true. That's all accurate stuff. Then we have the fact. Then we have the fact that really got my attention. A snake's tongue is not a weapon nor harmful in any way. It is really an organ to receive impressions, perhaps a sort of ear. I had never heard this idea in my life, and to be clear, it is not true. So I reached out to some people from the university that I had studied at, and my former professor Kurt Schwenk informed me that this was actually a genuine belief that people held about snakes for some time, although he did add that better information was available at the time that this book was published, so they don't get a pass on this one. We now know better and recognize that snakes use their tongues to gather particles from their environment, which are then washed up into their vomeronasal organ via salivary ducts, where they are then interpreted by that vomeronasal organ as chemosensory information. We use taste and smell for our chemosensory inputs, so the vomeronasal organ in snakes could very well be something similar to, but not exactly the same as ours as scent or taste. Although we can't really say for sure, since the snakes aren't telling us what their experience is like for them, and we can't experience it for ourselves, at least not in the same way. The presence of a vomeronasal organ in the majority of adult humans has recently been established, but it is very reduced to the point where we long thought it didn't exist and is probably fully vestigial in our species. However, it is present in many other species. And if you've ever seen a cat make that weird face after smelling something unusual, they were using their own vomeronasal organ to gather additional chemosensory information about a smell that got them curious. It looks particularly goofy in horses and deer when they curl their upper lip. This behavior is called flemening, although there are variations on the term, and it's how mammals use their vomeronasal organ, at least the mammals that have one worth using. The rest of the false ideas section is much better. The next myth the book dispels is that though reflex motions persist in a snake long after death, the setting of the sun has nothing to do with its death. Which is interesting because I had not heard of this before, but it sounds like people used to believe that a mortally wounded snake wouldn't actually die until sunset. That's my best guess, at least, at what that is trying to refute. But the book is correct that the sun has nothing to do with it, although there is some truth in the beginning section that snakes can have reflexive movements even after, well, I guess it depends on what you define as death. But people have been bitten by the heads of decapitated rattlesnakes. I believe I've heard that can happen hours after the head has been removed from the rest of the body. So I think that's probably where the myth began. And yeah, so people, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, people have been bitten by the heads of decapitated rattlesnakes enough times that you would think we'd learn to just stop cutting their heads off by now. The next myth busting sentence here, snakes do not swallow their young to protect them. That's true. Hoop snakes do not roll like hoops. That's an interesting one because it seems the authors here are conceding the existence of hoop snakes, but refuting the only notable characteristic of the legendary hoop snake, which, if you didn't know, can allegedly hold its tail in its mouth and curve itself into a wheel, which can roll at speeds of 60 miles per hour and chase you down before springing their body straight again and spearing you with their tail like a javelin. I agree with the book that there are not snakes rolling into hoops, but I think I'd go even farther and say hoop snakes just don't exist at all. Then we have milk snakes do not milk cows. That is correct. Horsehairs do not turn into snakes. Another interesting myth I hadn't heard of, but yes, the book is correct here. Snakes do not come from horsehairs. Then we have a pretty accurate explanation of rattlesnake buttons and how they aren't a reliable way to determine age, which is true because they shed more than once a year and because parts of their rattle might have broken off. Next up, removal of fangs from a poisonous snake does not render it harmless since other fangs may take their place very soon. Which is so close to being fully correct, except the book is using the term poisonous here when more recent sources tend to prefer distinguishing poison from venom. In regards to snakes posing a risk to humans with their fangs, that would be describing something that is venomous, not necessarily poisonous, although there are a small number of snakes that are poisonous, meaning predators will get sick if they eat the snake. But it is definitely true that snakes can regrow their fangs and that a venomous snake that has lost its fangs will not be without fangs forever. Finally, the misconception section ends on this. Children have no inborn fear of snakes, and adults should not fill their minds with silly, untrue, and ignorant ideas. And while some people still debate the question of inborn snake fear, the suggestions for adults have certainly stood the test of time and hold true today. And with that, we have finished the false ideas about snakes section of the book, which marks our endpoint for today. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Tell me about some snake misconceptions you've heard, or even just comment to say hi, because that's engagement, and YouTube loves it when you have engagement, which means more people will see the video, and I can teach more people about snakes, and then they can also leave a comment just to say hi. Be sure to stay tuned for part 2, or for the video of me and Cookie at the Reptile Expo, which honestly will probably be the one I upload first because I doubt I'll have the next part of this series filmed before I go there and get that footage. Until next time, I'm Cody, and you've been watching Seagrave Serpentarium. They also leave out the non-avian oh my god, Ruby. The section... Ruby, could you go? Ruby? Doo-dee-doo! Doo-doo-doo-doo! Oh, good lord. Oh, I hope I got a whole usable video out of that, because this is uncomfortable.